Hi, welcome to another episode of Cybeers. Today I'm joined by Richard Granger, Global Head of Digital Forensics and Incident Response.
Thank you for having me.
And first time for a while, Brad Morgan, Security Operations Centre Manager.
Thank you for inviting me to come back.
Welcome, guys. Brad's first time in the new, bigger, better, improved studio. What are your first thoughts?
It's nice. It's a big improvement. Much more comfortable.
Yeah, taking over the world one Cyber at a time. So, Rich, as always, you don't drink beer, mate. What have you got?
Yep, so I decided we're going to do a bit of a tour of Scotland, starting off with Hendrick's, a classic Scottish gin. It's pretty good. You can find it everywhere.
Love it.
Great with some cucumber. But yeah, that's
I
for
like
today.
mine with the nice blood orange wheel.
Blood orange. Interesting. I haven't tried that.
Yeah, you can get them from certain liquor lands now, I think.
Okay.
They also do, for those who are into their gin, they do little tea bag bombs that you can put into gin. They give it a bit of flavour.
Okay.
My wife absolutely loves them. Gin season's almost over, or
I mean,
continue
gin
kicking through the
season's
year?
every season, right?
Yeah, especially your the one that you got me on with is the Bloody Shiraz.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the gateway gin, as you call it.
Well, speaking of gateway gins, I have found one that I think we might be able to get another convert going.
He said he'll never drink gin.
Because
I'm not confident.
you're a whiskey man though, right?
I am a
So you
whiskey
just got to find a gin that tastes enough like whiskey, and then you'd be like, actually, this isn't too bad. And then I got you.
You're on the hook. And then you start going down the weird and wonderful paths. He's got one from North Melbourne. Give it a plug. Can't remember the name of it. He's looking at you, kid.
Oh, he's looking at you, kid.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great gin.
If you're in Melbourne, you can get to North Melbourne. He's looking at you, kids.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So, all right. What does the Hendrick's taste like? Is it dry? Is it fruity?
It's basically like a classic gin, quite
So an
juniper
everyday gin.
heavy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you like a classic gin, then you can't really go wrong with Hendrick's.
And you got it with the Soda Smith.
Yeah, the Soda Smith. So the Tassie tonic water, this one is quite good. We've got some in the office, which is where I pinched this from. So
Shout out to Zoe for
thank you, Zoe,
for us.
for organising all of the gin things
Our
that I
lives.
asked for.
Our
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah, it's good pairing.
Yeah. Normally you're on the Cappy, so you've moved to the Soda Smith.
Yeah, because Cappy is very easy to get everywhere,
Yeah.
right? But if you plan ahead, you can get like a case of these.
Yeah.
And you're set.
Yeah. That's why Zoe looks after us so well.
Yeah.
Brad, what have you got today?
I've gone the Matzo's alcoholic ginger
You
beer.
do
so
love a Matzo's.
I do. I mean, I'm bred in WA. I wasn't born there, but I was bred there, right?
You didn't grow up there though, because you didn't grow up.
Exactly. I'm still yet to grow up. Melbourne's trying to make it happen. But no, it's an absolutely brilliant beverage. I found this first, it'll be 15 years ago now, I think, and I've loved it ever since.
WA team always raves about it. They're
They do.
always talking about it.
It tastes just like summer. It's absolutely perfect. On a nice day, it's nice and refreshing. And
Where's it from?
it's Broome. They actually now say Broome and Sunshine Coast. But yeah, originally Broome. The whole brewery's up there. And
Spicy, not spicy?
it's a little bit spicy. It's
Just like your personality, a
perfect-
little bit spicy.
a little bit, sometimes. It's just got the perfect ginger flavour and goes down very, very easily. Sometimes a little bit too easily.
Yeah. Well, a lot of companies are now brewing ginger beer, so that's interesting.
I still
everywhere,
see this
yeah.
as one of the original and the best, I think, for my flavour.
Fantastic. Look, and I've stuck with a Collingwood local. So, as with Cybeers, the last one, Stomping Ground, big fan. This week I've gone the Laneway Lager. It's nice and hot outside. Didn't want to go anything too heavy. Don't like fruity. I'm trying to avoid IPAs at the moment because I find they're a little bit too heavy. So, gone the Laneway Lager. Gentlemen, cheers.
Cheers.
That's just what you want out of a lager. Honestly, Stomping Ground, they've just nailed their lagers and their pale ales.
They have.
If you're gonna make beer, if you're gonna be a brewery, there's two things you need to get right: a lager and a pale ale. It's funny how many breweries get their pales and their lagers wrong, but that, honestly, that's a nice afternoon.
Yep.
So, gents, what are we talking about today? I believe it's modern threat vectors and Brad, what we're seeing in the SOC, and Rich, what we're seeing from an incident response perspective.
Yep. Yeah.
Sometimes together.
Sometimes
Sometimes
yeah,
together.
Sometimes
Well,
it's
that's happening more and more, right?
It is.
Yeah.
This was the whole point of building the incident response team, is what we were saying in the SOC. We realised was translating across the incident response. So, Brad, what's the latest for this week? I know there's been something pretty big going on.
Yeah, look, I mean, for us, the most recent this week's been, we've had two really big ones. The first one we should touch on is probably Pikabot, first up. And then we can lead into, beyond that, is MFA bypass.
So what is Pikabot?
So Pikabot is it's a new Trojan that's coming through, or a new piece of malware coming through. It's had an uptick recently. The main uptick was supposedly related to Blackbuster last year, following the FBI takedown of Qbot, Quackbot, however you want to say it.
Well, now ALPHV, Black Cat they've taken themselves offline after
Taking cheeky 22 million with them.
Little cheeky.
Allegedly.
Take the money and run, yeah, allegedly.
It wasn't, the funniest part was it wasn't even theirs. It was meant to just split with the affiliate.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
Who trusts a criminal?
Well, and that particular, apparently, I was listening to something this morning that the ransomed, it was a health
United
organisation. Yeah, United Healthcare. They've received some of the decryption keys, but the affiliate is the one who is holding the data for the extortion. So they haven't been paid yet. So this opens up a very, very interesting conundrum, I guess. Are they going to have to pay again, or at least pay something to that affiliate to make sure that data's not released?
No. Okay, as we know from the Lockbit takedown, the law enforcement agencies got access to the back end. And we've discovered from the Lockbit leak that when they say they're deleting data, Rich, they're not necessarily deleting the data.
We've known that for a while. And essentially, you're kind of taking their word for it, that they're deleting it. Like sometimes,
the word of a criminal.
Word of a criminal. Sometimes you will get a nice little video that actually shows, deleting a folder.
Progress bar.
Exactly, but like...
Meanwhile,
there's copies of it elsewhere. We know that threat actors have redundancies in place for this
Lockbit
infrastructure.
proves that. Back in a week.
Yeah. So I mean, there's probably going to be a bit of flow-on effect from this, right? Where it's kind of a bit more mainstream now that they say that they delete the data, they don't, and how's that going to impact ransom payments going forward?
But as we've always said, they're not hitting organisations to sell the data. It's not necessarily the data they want. They're doing it because it's like a traditional ransom. Traditional ransom, someone gets kidnapped and then you pay it to get it back, right? It's the same as a ransomware. You're paying to get your data back because they've gotten in, they've encrypted everything, they've deleted the data, especially if it's on a NAS. Backups.
100%, yeah.
And you're paying them to get your data back, right?
Yeah.
So just because they've got a copy of it and they're retaining it, it's not going to really change the strategy.
I know. And in ransomware engagements that we've been in where a ransom has been paid, we've not observed a threat actor issue the data, make it available again.
No.
I mean, it does happen. It's just we haven't observed that happen.
We have seen a number of recompromises.
We have,
though,
yes.
and there's one in particular that I'm thinking of that we contained, and then everything was going fine. What happened next?
An alert in CrowdStrike firing at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Yep. And picked up by Mike. The SOC actually first, wasn't it, Brad?
Yeah, SOC picked it up.
SOC picked it up. So because we deploy our tools for 45 days during a ransomware investigation, no cost to the client, no cost to the insurer. We do it so you guys can have hands on keyboard.
It's imperative to get visibility of the network, especially during a ransomware attack. You need to know what's going on.
Yeah, you guys can do hands on keyboard, getting clients back online, safe and secure. Yeah. Whereas Brad and his team are monitoring for any re-encryption. So what happened with this one in particular?
Essentially the initial access vector that allowed the threat actor to get in the first place was a VPN, no MFA, and basically it had been brute forced, which we actually saw a lot of ransomware engagements at the end of last year through the same thing, just brute forcing VPNs, no MFA. And then obviously the containment and remediation steps that we requested to be done by the IT provider for the client was let's turn off that VPN because they were already planning on decommissioning that firewall and implementing a new one, and then change the passwords for all the accounts as well, because that's a thing that we will do for all ransomwares. It's we might find evidence that they've done an ntds.dit dump and taken everything, but you don't want to risk it. Like, even if we can't find evidence happening, it might have happened. So
Well, it's highly likely.
it's
that
highly
it's
likely.
happened.
So
Right,
it's like at that stage.
We see it in most ransomware, so why are we going to try and
SOP.
prove
Exactly.
something that we know happens
Yeah.
in 95% of
It's like,
cases?
change every single password, rotate
Service accounts.
service account, admin accounts, user accounts,
Everything.
Kerberos twice,
The CEOs,
10 hours apart.
the CEOs change his and make sure MFAs on the CEOs. Just heard a story that a friend of mine works at a company and everyone's got MFA besides one person. Who do you reckon
That
it
is-
is? The CEO.
I was going to say CFO.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it happens, right?
Yeah.
So no MFA, change passwords.
No passwords changed. And essentially, we got an alert that saying the same account had re-entered via the same method and started performing enumeration and stuff, like very early stuff that we normally see during a ransomware. So
Yeah.
luckily, the tools were still in there.
Yep.
Fired an alert, SOC jumped immediately on it, and they pinged Mike, which is, as you mentioned, a very beneficial thing about having a 24/7 DEFA team, because I didn't get that call. I was sleeping like a baby.
Woke up and you're like, oh, well done, Mike. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you take it the other way. It's also beneficial for the DEFA team to have a 24/7 SOC behind them as well.
100%.
It means you guys
absolutely.
don't. You guys can take that
Yeah,
time, and
exactly.
you know that we're monitoring in the background for these sorts of things as well.
100%. And they were able to contain it within 10 minutes, and then pulled disk images, doing full forensics, understand what had happened during the time period they were in there. But, we essentially stopped it from progressing to the same stage as it would have been during the initial ransomware.
Yeah, look, it's crazy. They are coming back. It used to be the case of the threat actors would have so many victims on the go at one time that they just moved one to the next. They wouldn't even know that if they had persistent access or if they had to come back.
Yeah.
But now they do. They know who they've hit.
Yeah.
They know what they've got and they know what they want to do.
It's why checking for persistence is so important, especially if you're restoring from backups, because you don't want to be restoring to, let's say, like the day before a ransomware attack, when they might have been in there for a month, a week, and installed some kind of backdoors, and you're just putting it back to how it was.
Exactly.
So very important to do that forensic analysis and understand what's happened.
It is.
For sure. So Brad, Pikabot, take us, dude. We touched on it.
Yeah.
We touched on why it's important, right? And it's a new campaign, I believe, that's getting around.
Yeah, so what's been out at the moment, which we had come into an environment we only picked up because of an outbound connection. It wasn't picked up by EDR.
It wasn't picked up by EDR.
No, so we detected an outbound SMB connection that was thankfully blocked on the firewall. So it got escalated over to DEFA pretty quickly, and they pulled it apart, and no detection on it. So
How come the EDR
it was
wasn't picking up?
so I've looked into it a fair bit. It's brand new. This is all the previous obfuscation is gone. They've pulled all of that. So a couple of the sources I've been looking into, there's a little bit of conjecture that maybe someone fat-fingered a button and early released of their new code base.
Oh,
So
that's a bit brutal.
there's a couple of sources I've seen that have said this. As I say, it is conjecture, but
Has it
there's
been
no
attributed yet?
obfuscation in there. The attribution not yet that I've seen, but yeah, it's coming in via phishing. So what they're talking about is they're injecting into historic phishing email chains.
Historic
yeah.
phishing email.
Historic email chains, not phishing emails, that have been captured through previous compromises. So we're looking at the Exchange vulnerabilities and things like that recently, where they've been able to get in and capture some of this, and then now they're positioning through phishing to get this into environments. So
Hang on, I'm in cyber, apparently. This is news to me, and I'm scared of this.
this is news that I've been reading up on this in the last few days because it scares me.
And we've seen it, right? We've
have.
seen it live in the wild.
Another really good method it's able to bypass like traditional sort of security is it's essentially a zip file, and in there is a HTML file, a Java file, whatever, that's making an outbound connection via SMB to threat actors' infrastructure. So the malicious part's probably going to be what it's going to download from there, which hopefully EDR tools, like we've seen some examples of like Cobalt Strike being dumped.
Yeah, which you find
Manambukas,
Mimikatz running,
which fingers crossed, EDRs should be able to
Well,
to detect.
You
Should be able to.
better. You're better EDRs, and
Yeah.
we'll encourage people to jump onto the MITRE comparison between EDR and endpoint solution.
Yeah.
So it's a free tool. They're independent. It's MITRE. They built the MITRE attack framework. You're not taking the word of every EDR vendor that's won an award and going, hey, we're top right of the Gartner Magic Quadrant, trust us. The MITRE team is just completely independent. They're fantastic. So if anyone's watching, wants some advice on EDR, jump onto the MITRE comparison tool.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully it should get picked up as a payload, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's also like another interesting aspect to it as well, is that during that attempt to fetch a file from the ThreatX infrastructure, it can also disclose the hash of the account, right?
I'm out.
There's chained commands, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there's no obfuscation around that. You can
Yeah.
see the commands.
Yeah.
Because it's using Microsoft link files.
Yeah.
And it's using the capability within link files to call command. And it is tying these commands together. And I saw one example where it's calling curl to go and get, the data from the threat actor's infrastructure.
Yeah.
And then, doing what you're saying about the password.
That's
It's just-
exactly what we saw. I know you mentioned that like Black Basta have been involved in this stuff, and we've had a Black Basta engagement before where it was exactly the same thing. It was through a link file, chain commands, curl. It was actually quite sophisticated in how they did it. Like it would test stuff, and
Yep.
it was quite interesting.
And some of the research I've had a look at, this is one of the ones that is looking for if it's in sandbox environments. And I say they've removed obfuscation, that they are still doing these checks.
Yeah.
So it'll check
to
if
make
it's running in a sandbox, and if it discovers it's in a sandbox, it just won't do it.
It's really hard to start diagnosing from that point.
Wow.
So it's, yeah.
So we saw it in a Black Basta investigation before.
Not Pikabot, but similar kind of
But if you're seeing the
second
same-
payloads.
Okay,
Yeah.
but if you're seeing similar TTPs, we saw early proxy shell. We saw it very early before it was proxy shell. We've seen a few things early through the SOC MSDT.exe being process hollowed and tunneled that then turned out to actually be a thing. So there's stuff that we see. Do we think it's possible that we were seeing early signs? Brad, you said it could be someone's accidentally released something.
Yeah.
Is it possible it's one of these big threat actor groups, Rich, do you think, that has developed something that maybe shouldn't have gotten released into the wild, or is it still too early to tell?
It's early to tell, but like this would be a very popular thing for like initial access brokers, right?
Okay.
Yeah, it's a really good way to get a
'Cause
foothold.
if we look back to what Black Basta, that, correct me if I'm wrong, they've got a history of using Qbot for their initial access.
Yeah.
So this is the replacement for Qbot.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So now you're starting to see these ransomware gangs wanting to use this for initial access.
And then if you can grab the hash as a threat actor, then the company doesn't have MFA on their VPN
or RDP open.
or RDP exposed
the internet,
to
right?
the internet,
Like,
which we still see. Then they're just able to use that hash.
Yeah.
But then the really scary part that we're starting to see a bit of, especially in DeFi, is MFA bypass,
Yes.
especially on M365. So how is that happening? What's going on there? Because MFA is tagged as the savior, right? It's the thing.
Yeah, I mean, we still do have engagements where MFA is not applied, but increasingly we're seeing engagements where people are like, I've got MFA on that account, but how did they take over? And it's all to do with session token theft. So what's happening is when the user is authenticating, even with the MFA part of the authentication, is that session token is being stolen, and then a threat actor can actually just paste that into a tool, their browser, like a plugin on the browser, and
Don't even need to
authenticate.
crack it.
Don't even
Just
need to crack
replay
it.
the
Literally
session
copy and paste.
How are they stealing the session token?
EvilGenX is a very popular tool.
I remember we released a blog on EvilGenX 3 years ago. So it's now becoming an actively used tool that they're grabbing that session token.
Yeah.
Do you have to click something? Do you have to download a payload?
So most of the time it's through a phishing email, and then it's getting you to click on a link to a domain that's hosting an EvilGenX front end.
So don't even need to
And-
put in credentials. Just click the link.
You will, but you can also like be presented with legitimate Microsoft 365 login pages.
Yeah.
So,
Legitimate.
Yeah, so you can't tell the difference. The only really way that you can is by looking at the URL where you're logging in.
So what they're doing, and I've seen a demo of this from an email gateway provider, and it blew my mind when he showed me. And I mean, as you said, you're in cyber. So within that, they're basically clicking the link, they're being shown a credential harvesting site. And instead of the old way that the credentials would just be forwarded through to a database, what they're actually doing now, they're taking them and playing them on the legitimate Microsoft site. That triggers the MFA request for the user. So they're either hitting yes, it's me on their phone, or they're entering the secure code. That's getting replayed to Microsoft. Once they're authenticated, then the attacker is authenticated on their machine, and then it redirects them to Microsoft legitimate. So they, as far as they're aware,
Nothing's gone wrong.
nothing's gone wrong. They've just logged into Microsoft. It is scary, and we've seen both ways in the last couple of weeks. And
Stop. Just stop, right? I want to get off.
Funny story, right? So we've been doing some testing with this in the DEFA team and with help from the offensive team as well. And
Shout out to the offensive
Yes,
team, right?
thank you for
They're
helping with
considerably
this.
helping with this.
and so Mike was doing some stuff overnight our time, including creating an account in M365, and then he forgot to send us the password for this account. So you know what the guys did? So Caleb and Cam, they just take the stolen token from Evil Gen X, and then they log in and then create their own accounts that way. And because it was an admin account, so that just sort of highlights, if you get that token for an admin account, you can do whatever you want because you're a legitimate authentication.
And I believe that is being released as research.
Yes,
Probably by the time this Cybeers goes out,
Yeah.
we'll have that exact
That blog post
research
will be
of,
up,
of
yeah.
what happened on the website. That's insane. All
Scary.
right, so it's possible with M365, which you're seeing a fair bit of. And I remember when I was heavily involved in the DEFA team, which you kicked me out of the Cool Kids Club.
Sorry.
So you should be. That we were starting to see this, right? We were starting to see these MFA bypasses, and we were saying, well, how and why? Now we've worked this out, and we've said, well, this is how and why. Brad, the question to you is, it's on M365. Is it on VPNs? Is it on logins to third-party apps? Like the biggest concern for every organisation during DEFA is zero.
Yep.
Right? Is it possible on these other platforms, or is it localised?
I firmly believe it would be possible. I've seen examples of phishing as a service organisations out there that they will host all the infrastructure for you. If you're a malicious actor, and I'm not condoning this by any means, and I'm not suggesting anyone does it, but you can go and pay them a fee and they will spin up the infrastructure for you to attack an organisation. So it is amazingly complex, the level that these places are going to.
But can you steal the session tokens then from a tool like Zero, or is it specifically within M365?
The way this works, if they're proxying that through, I would expect that they are able to then do it for any organisation that they can proxy that traffic and steal it. Like it exactly right. At least with Microsoft 365, there are extra measures we can take. With Zero, I'm not calling Zero out.
No, I just use that example because it's always the question during incident response.
Yeah.
All right, well,
They get into
have
Zero.
they gotten access to Zero? Because every organisation we ask, we say, well, where's your customer data or your employee data?
Yep.
It's always in a third-party cloud platform. Always remember to check if you've taken a copy of that system before you move to the cloud system. We see that all the time during incident response, don't we? The
old
backup is
database
stored
and-
somewhere. So it's possible.
I believe it would be possible. It would be a couple of tweaks, but I think from your experience,
Yeah.
it is definitely possible.
One of the sort of things that's been going on for a little while now is Booking.com,
Yep.
where essentially threat actors, instead of taking a user account in M365, they're getting a hold of a Booking.com account for a hotel, and they're finding all of these bookings for legitimate people and sending them messages saying, your credit card didn't work. Can you send a new one? And it's coming through the app. It's looking like a legitimate
Of course,
message
because it's actually coming from the provider.
account, from the hotel. And so people are putting in their, providing credit card details and stuff like that. And then the threat actor's got those.
Threat actor just goes and buys some Bitcoin, which has hit all-time high, and
Yeah.
thanks for coming.
Yeah.
All right, how do we protect against this? Surely, please tell me in M365 there's something we can do, guys.
There is. I mean, there's a cost, but I think the cost of doing this in 365 outweighs the cost of being
Well,
compromised.
it's a risk-based analysis,
It
right?
is,
Every
it is.
security professional will tell you you've got to weigh the risk versus the reward.
Yeah.
It's
And these days it has to be, MFA is not enough. You have to be looking at trusted assets. You have to be trusted locations, enrolled devices. You have to be looking down that route.
so you can't log in unless your device is enrolled.
Exactly.
If
As long as
you've got
you're
a certificate on it.
Yep.
I don't want to say the two dirty words that I hate because it's still just a term. Zero trust. Right.
do not, in this instance, I would not trust any asset that is not listed in your Intune
Yeah.
and is not managed, patched, and up to date in your Intune.
Yeah, okay.
That-
But then for Intune, you've got to be paying for E3 or E5 licensing.
E3, I think, is a minimum.
I think it's E3 as a minimum, which is quite a considerable cost.
Yeah.
I was providing some guidance to a client last week, and they're just moving across to M365, and he said, what licensing? I went, E5.
Yep.
Just don't even think twice about it.
Yep.
You'll get your data loss prevention through Purview. You'll get all your MFA, your geo-blocking, Intune. You'll get all of it.
Yep.
I am still a firm believer, if you are heavily in the Microsoft ecosystem, that the Microsoft tools are the right tools. That only with one caveat, with Defender Plan 2, if it's monitored. Yep. Too many times we've seen Defender being used in instant response, where it's flagged something and it's going, something's going on.
No one's there to look at it.
Something went on. Right. I still see Defender as being great at endpoint detection, but your tools that, again, use the minor attack framework to compare, but other tools are better at the response side of things.
I think it's a diversification as well. So, yes, Defender's great, but at least having a different EDR tool there gives you a different point of view, right? You're getting an alert from a different location that might not get lost in the noise of all of the other alerting coming through Microsoft.
If it's being monitored and checked and tuned, though, surely Microsoft's going to is good enough.
It is.
If it's configured properly, because you pull M365 out the box, you look at their security score, I think it's like 42% secure out the box. It's insecure
Out of the box.
the box. You've got to turn these things on. I was talking to a client the other day. He said, on the back of your risk assessment, technical assessment, I've now gotten it from 50 to 90.2. So he didn't know that he had to go and turn all these settings on.
Yeah.
Yep.
But Rich, now the worst part is we're starting to see EDR bypass. Like we're sitting here plugging, we've always said EDR, but now we're seeing EDR bypass. So now we've got MFA bypass.
Yeah.
What is EDR bypass?
So there's a couple of different ways you can do it. Some is like really complex, and it's probably better we have someone from the offensive team run through those. But like,
Elliot will be able to take us
exactly
through that.
like
I can
you can
assure
you can do all.
That guy scares me.
Same.
Yeah. I have sleepless nights.
So like, there's definitely some things you can do from that perspective, and just like bypassing the EDR. But there are some more basic things as well, which is simply just booting into safe mode with networking, which we've seen during a ransomware, where the threat actor's like, all right, you've got a security tool on here. It's all right, we'll just run a script. It'll boot everything into safe mode with networking and then deploy the ransomware.
And what does that do?
It just, because when they boot up into safe mode, it's only loading like the
Limited
bare
processes.
minimum services, drivers, which
And
can
EDR
include
doesn't.
Well,
not all.
We found recently
Yeah.
that we had an issue where there was a machine about to be wiped, and we wanted to run a test and see if CrowdStrike would stop the Microsoft remote wipe. And I was adamant that the machine would wipe. Rich is like, I'm not sure. CrowdStrike might get in and stop it if we quarantine it first. I said no.
Bit of a
CrowdStrike,
race.
yeah, it was a race between the two tools. CrowdStrike is a process on Windows, so Windows has to boot completely first. So if you can stop CrowdStrike from running, then it's not going to be able to do what it needs to do. So if you can get in before that and kill it, you're in, and that's what safe mode does.
Yeah.
That's twice now. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So how do we protect against that?
I guess that's kind of like where monitoring comes in, right? Because
Yeah.
there's going to normally be something leading up to.
You got to do something first.
like at the point where a ransomware group is ready to deploy a script to reboot in safe mode and deploy the ransomware, there's going to be a lot of activity leading up to that.
Yep.
And that's kind of that's why you have those tools in place.
Yeah.
And you're monitoring them so you can identify it early on.
Stop it as far, I always say as far left as possible.
Yeah.
Stop it at the firewall first. Don't just, and this is where I've been saying for years, EDR, XDR, don't just rely on the endpoint detection and response solution. You need to be monitoring your firewalls. You need to have an intrusion detection system in place, prevention preferably. Defense in depth, layered controls, it's the basic principles of cyber. Too many organizations are getting sold, in my opinion, by these EDR solutions that are saying, we'll stop it on the endpoint.
Yep.
Now we're seeing EDR bypass because the threat actor's already in there. And then if they can restart in safe mode because they've grabbed an admin hash, or worse still, they've gotten into M365 because they've bypassed MFA.
Disabled it.
They've gone looking around. They found a service account password that's located in SharePoint. That's my favorite way to get in through a red team engagement. Now all of a sudden I've got that. I can reboot in safe mode, disable your EDR. Game over.
Yeah.
So you need that defense in depth and the layered controls. Brad, you touched on something before about the phishing as a service. The one that scares me even more is Worm GPT. So Jack got me across this. Chat GPT without the safeguards. Ask it to write you a phishing email targeted at specific vertical in specific country and set up the infrastructure, and it will do it for you.
Yep.
Is this why we're seeing a big increase in PEC?
I don't think so.
Just because contentious, I think it is.
There's two parts to it. Like we could, but a lot of the phishing emails that we see, they're not like overly sophisticated.
But aren't they getting better in terms of language and URLs and things?
Yeah, some of them are. Like
Yep,
some of them
definitely.
do look like pretty cookie cutter, like templates and stuff like that. But we have seen some where it's like click on this Dropbox SharePoint link.
Yeah, of course.
But there has been some sort of thought behind that, and that the threat actors are targeting the people that don't know that Dropbox and SharePoint are a separate thing. So they're basically including it because someone who doesn't know the difference, which a lot of people, if you don't work in IT, it's
You're not going to know.
storage for stuff. So that's the people that they want to get, right?
Yep, absolutely. Brad, you reckon it's Worm GPT or
To
the
an extent,
infrastructure?
yes, but I think there's threat actors out there that have taken a couple of leaves out of the initial access broker and the ransomware playbook, and they've realised there's big money to be made in building platforms that will automate this process. And I think that's where phishing as a service is coming from. You know, there's organisations out there that are specialising at targeting financial institutions in particular countries. Canada's being targeted very heavily at the moment. We do see some through Australia as well. So I think there's a number of drivers there, but I think Worm GPT and many of the others out there are contributing. OpenAI recently put something out that they've disabled a number of malicious accounts. Well, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
When there's something like Worm GPT out there, they're not using OpenAI.
No.
They're using their own tooling.
maybe
so
a 12-year-old kid is that doesn't
Script
know
kiddies.
Worm GPT exists.
Exactly.
And then they go and start to look for something that doesn't have the safeguards and they discover Worm GPT and it becomes a very dangerous race.
Yeah.
So you're saying Canadian financial institutions are being hit. If history follows,
We're not far off.
we're next.
Yeah.
Guys, we don't have long left, but I just wanted to touch on one final thing, and that's the notification that came out about sleepers that are sitting inside of organisations. Big report that came out of ASD. Mike Burgess released details to the public that there are members of threat actor groups that are sitting inside large organisations, maybe even government, that are working for enemies of the country. Is that something we need to be concerned about, do you think?
I think it is. It's something that's always been on my mind. You know, we're employing people to work in a SOC that are monitoring clients within Australia that are now considered critical infrastructure.
Well, the banks are all now considered critical
Exactly.
infrastructure, right?
Yep.
With Sochi coming and the change to that, supermarkets are going to be considered critical infrastructure.
Yep.
It was proven during COVID, if you can't get to the supermarket, or the supermarket's down.
True.
Well, Mike Burgess, most recent, the example he used in his speech was Optus. When Optus went down for a day,
Oh,
Yeah.
the
Train
mayhem
stopped.
it caused. Exactly, right?
people couldn't work.
Exactly. So the example he used was imagine all telecom going down, the impact that would have nationwide.
Chaos.
You know, it's scary. So, yeah, there needs to be many more controls put on who has access to these platforms and who has access to this data. We need to get better at doing that.
I think back to, it makes me think of the Cold War when there were red canaries that are sitting inside of, Russian sleeper cells that are inside Americans, and even the Americans did it, just didn't have a cool term like red canaries. Makes me laugh that there is a cybersecurity tool called canary tokens, and I think there's even one called red canaries. So,
Yep.
modern threat. So bypassing MFA, which scares me, bypassing EDR, which scares me, sleepers inside organisations, tools now available, MJPT, that you can spin up and have a perfectly defined phishing email. Phishing as a service that you can pay someone to host the infrastructure and write the emails. You just click the go button.
So
what do we do?
the
Leave
thing,
us with your wise words of wisdom, Brad.
the thing that Mike Burgess touched on is BAU is not enough, right? What has been BAU historically has always had to change, right? And I worry that organisations have gotten a little bit complacent with where they're at the moment with security, and we need to keep looking for the future or looking toward the future and understand what future threats are coming and what we need to do to be ahead of those. But that starts with getting the foundations right now, right? We
Yep.
have to protect 365. We have to make sure our firewalls are effective. We need to look at our insiders, look at our people as well. It's, there's a lot more. I could go on, but
Get the basics right, which we still see a lot of organisations don't even have the basic maturity or basic building blocks in place. You've got to start with the basics. Don't try and go and slam something in now to protect against emerging threats if you can't even protect against the current threats. Rich, final piece of words of wisdom.
Protect your hypervisor.
Yeah.
oh yes,
Why do you want to protect your hypervisor? Surely VMware does that for me, or Hyper-V.
No, it's basically like we sort of touched on the EDR bypass, and we've seen if you get access to the hypervisor, you can do whatever you want. So you can basically attach data drives and then to a different machine that doesn't have security tooling on it, and then encrypt all that.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, so hypervisors.
scared him enough.
I know, sorry.
I'm in this industry and I'm scared.
It's just
I hate talking to you two
if,
sometimes.
if a threat actor can get a hold and access to your hypervisor, it's pretty much game over at that point. Like they can deploy ransomware across the hypervisor and encrypt all of your VMDKs. They can just do whatever they want. So it's really important to have network segregation in place for your hypervisor, that someone in like user land can't RDP to your Hyper-V server or SSH
So
to your ESXi host.
the reception machine shouldn't be able to RDP?
Shouldn't, not to the hypervisor, or probably
Or
the domain
anything.
controller.
Should
or
not be able
anything.
to RDP to
Yeah,
anything.
so-
Should come from a trusted
network-
network with a beachhead
Exactly.
or bastion host. That bastion host should be monitored, but
Yeah.
I've seen that effectively done once, and that's because I built it.
Yeah,
So,
it's network segregation.
all right. And mine is talk to these two more often. Talk to your cybersecurity experts. Talk to these people who deal with this all day, every day. Right? The stuff we're talking about, we're seeing right now. This is live. This is happening. So if you're just out there talking to your MSP, if you're taking advice that that product that you're paying $2 per endpoint per year for, and it's great, test it. Talk to these two. Get some advice from the experts. Well, guys, I'm scared. It's Friday afternoon. I appreciate that, but I learnt a lot, and I hope everyone did watching. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.